it's not sustainable logging. It's going to lead to complete ecological collapse.
The machinery has come to crap in our water.
They show that the forestry science is nothing but tobacco science.
Write them letters, like actual handwritten letters that will have the biggest impact.
Almost every drainage is being affected right now. It's really crucial. It's an emergency situation. Watersheds of Canada. We're in the mountains where the watersheds, we hold the water. All we do is create clouds out here. Instead of sending this all as raw pieces abroad, and then we buy a dresser that is gassed all the way back to us at cheaper than what we can make it.
Yeah.
So we have to develop our own economy based on our own resources and not deplete them, so there's nothing left for the future generations, you know.
That's protocol, and thank you, Eloise, for acknowledging the Sinaiaks, for acknowledging the ancestors of this land, the people who took care of this landscape for 12,000 years. Need some acknowledgement, and they didn't need protest to take care of the water. Sacred most things are being attacked. First of the sacred is the siuk. Siuk is the water, and water is life. We understood that always, and we understand it now, but now we're powerless because the machinery has come to crap in our water. To help us to open the minds and the hearts of those who have a say in government, to bring forth the protections that we ask for, that this water that is here, we understand, is not just for us, Kootenays. It is for all life. It is for all people.
A lot of the machinery is named after animals. Bobcat, the tiger. So I just had this really strange image one night of the future forest being a cut block with all those animals in them, but they're machines. We'll have the right to clean, safe, natural sources of water, as well as biodiverse forests that provide for our wildlife, medicinal wildcrafting, outdoor recreation, and that this should be for generations to come. Although we are living in very challenging times, you know, near the tipping point of climate change, increased floods, forest fires, decreased water supplies, declining wildlife and fish populations. From a global standpoint, it may not seem like here in the Kootenays that we have reached that critical point, which is why I feel it's very important that we have the foresight to see it coming and make the necessary changes to protect and preserve this incredible place, not let it get to that critical point. And we all have an important role in doing this. There's many organizations working towards this. For Mick and Eloise and I, our role, you know, as protesters, as blockaders, you know, on the roads, and that's really to just delay while we wait for the change, because actually our ecosystem can't wait for us humans to get it together. So that's why we're out there, just trying to delay it, because as we speak and sign petitions and have meetings, the machines are still moving. In fact, they feel the pressure coming, and they're just increasing the volume at which they're working. The workers are getting exhausted because they feel this change coming, and they're just, timber prices are very high, and also the allowable annual cuts are based on a timber supply assessment from over a decade ago. So the volume at which they're logging is completely unsustainable, because it hasn't taken into consideration our historical forest fires, for example. So it's not sustainable logging. It's going to lead to complete ecological collapse. Our kokanee fish are almost gone, and they're logging above spawning channels, you know, and then the caribou, we just slowly watch them pretty much become extinct. So we really want to advocate towards changing the legislation and reducing those allowable cuts to consider the times we're living in. Another issue is the independent contractors get fined if they don't meet those allowable cuts. So even they're in a really difficult position as well. As Interior Lumber Manufacturers Association was quoted saying, we've logged out the back country, so now we're in the front country. So in our watersheds. And it's volume-based logging, so not area-based. So this volume-based logging with 50% of it or more going over the border, so not even to our local mills, not all of it anyway, and so further job loss as well, shutting down local mills that used to support communities. Also with the use of feller bunchers that can do the job of 12 crew members, and you get multiple feller bunchers in there, there's further job loss. And then our independent contractors, if they want to keep up, they have to travel further to these jobs. You know, they wipe out a valley and then they go on to the next. So our independent contractors' overhead costs go up, the carbon impact of hauling to these other places. So the whole argument about we're taking away jobs by trying to create this change, that's not the case. We're actually trying to create more jobs back into our local communities and open up our local mills again. Is they're replanting just the cash crop trees. So these monolithic forests, they're not biodiverse. They don't feed our wildlife, so that's another huge consideration. We're not living in these times that we were living in before, so we really got to take into consideration the cumulative effects of this volume-based logging combined with the historical rise of forest fires, and you can throw fire mitigation in there as well, and that's, you know, a touchy subject, but with all of those combined are resulting in the collapse of our ecosystems in the Kootenays. And we just don't have the time to wait. And we can honestly say that this land we're living in here, with the glacier-fed lakes and our forests, is amongst, is amongst the last in the world. Like, we can actually literally say that now, if we look on a global perspective. So, I don't know, for me it's like of the utmost urgency. And from what I can tell, studying the proposed logging plans of the top 4 licensee holders in the Kootenays, it appears as though all of our community watersheds will be logged out by mid-2019. You know, they feel the change coming. So, as far as making money, if I was a corporation, and timber's so high, it would be in my best interest to get as much of it as I could while I could. And that seems to be what's happening here. Because our water quality doesn't really need to be considered, because there's contingency plans such as bottled water. There's infrastructured water. Well, we shouldn't have to be forced to all be on treated water. Interior Health considers a population under 500. Their water quality doesn't have to be considered. So these rural communities don't even have protection from Interior Health perspective because they're under a population of 500. And then as far as these landslides increasing, floods, fires, well, according to the industry, that's all naturally occurring. So these are all just big green lights to go ahead and log it out, because there's zero accountability. They don't have to be accountable. And so it's costing us our watersheds and collapse of our ecosystem, and also the logging out of our climate stabilizing forests up the Duncan and Hauser and Glacier Creek. that feeds into our lake, that stabilizes our climate, that supports our fish, everything. That'll just completely collapse our environment here. So that it really needs to be addressed and haunts me at night when I sleep. We shouldn't have to adjust to the injustices by using less water or having water meters and then we pay more for water. And yeah, our water should be preserved so we're not having to monitor how much water we're using. So, and kind of backed into a corner right now as far as the rate at which this is happening and the timeline. This is not really something we can think about and address next year. A lot of the proposed plans are due to start in the spring. You know, we'll all be just coming out of winter, you know, not really out there. So it could really happen just right behind us without even noticing, right at coming out of winter. So it's something we've got to really be on, engage yourself in your watersheds, find out what's going on. Because when we went to Slocan City, Interfor was in their watershed. It was almost completely logged out, and we went down to the city of Slocan and they had no idea it had even happened. They thought their watershed was protected by someone managing it. They were devastated, you know, and they had no idea their watershed was even being logged out. So I really urge the communities to find out what's happening in your watersheds.
What they're using now is a crane. It's a highline crane that's beefed up. So it's super powerful, and they lower a fella bunch it down by a cable down these incredibly steep slopes, and these are remotely operated, and one operator can actually do 3 fella bunches at a time. So that was how they logged Give Out Creek Road. If some of you noticed that terrible logging, incredibly steep slopes, that was private land. So it's called the remotely operated bulldozer technique, or ROB. It was developed in New Zealand. If you Google it, you'll see it on YouTube. Now, everything you've said, we were saying in the 80s. This is nothing new. We've been talking and talking about this. A lot of us here have been on community watershed alliances, etc. The strategy the government has used is to divide and conquer. And they've been very successful. We ended up being very divided. We have to know our enemy and what we're dealing with. Finally, when you look at what happened with the pipeline, with the NEB, was called out because they hadn't had meaningful consultation. Well, this is how they wear us down. We're community members. We're not professionals. We fundraise. We hire experts. They come in. They give expert testimony. They show that the forestry science is nothing but tobacco science. It's repudiated by the best experts out there. They sit, they're very polite. The community gets worn down. At the end of it, they say, thank you very much, and it's business as usual. There is no commitment. There is nothing they have to do to address the concerns we take up. So we get worn down, people get frustrated, it turns inwards, and there's an implosion, and the resistance gets fractured. So we have to know this, and we have to guard against that. I have been on, and a lot of you here have been on committees. We've spent huge amounts of time. I was a wilderness rep on the Committee of Resources and Environment way back in the 90s. Same process. We eventually try to get a land use plan happening, and again, it kind of got shelved. I understand the NDP has never really been our friend. Prior in the 80s, we used to have visual corridors, and that was in a Socratic government, believe it or not. So anything you could see on the highways was protected. They could not log that. That gave watersheds protection. The NDP scrapped that, and let's be clear, the NDP is dominated by the IWA. They give them huge campaign contributions. They say what they will, but they are fractured within, and they are compromised. So the strategy they've been saying is, don't waste your vote. Vote for us. Vote strategically. It's complete bullshit. Don't buy it. Vote for the Greens. We've got to build up our resistance. So, finally, I encourage you just to keep all going, spread the word, talk to your neighbors. I'd like to thank the people who've organized this. We will prevail. Make no mistake, we will prevail. But we have to expose the techniques they're using, and we have to educate our fellow members, and we have to stand together. We have to solve our differences. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Up on what Pierre said. Pierre lived on Perry Ridge years ago, and when he's talking about the government wearing down the people, I still encourage you all to continue to lobby them in any way you can. Petitions here are the important things that we're doing, that we can't give up, that yes, they can waste your time with their planning tables. We sat for 2 years at a Commission on Resource and Environment table, and at the very last, and the government was all being paid, industry was all being paid, so we'd turn up and we'd all sit and we'd give our ideas, we gave our mapping. We were the forerunners of the watershed movement. At the end of that process, the government stood up on the last day and said, we will only do what we're legislated to do. And because watersheds are not legislated for protection, they're part of the cut. Corky Evans said, we log watersheds. So I encourage people to work for legislation that protects the headwater areas. Find some sort of a category, make it a park, make it a conservancy, make it an eco-reserve. It needs to be legislated to be protected. Yes, we want to talk to our neighbors. The mill is closed in Slocan. We're talking to our neighbors now. We have to. We all live there. So I just wanted to say, because I'm freezing here and sounding a little tired out from all of the activities, it's good to see young faces. It's good to hear the optimism, because maybe the government's learned something. However, when we look at what Native people have done for 500 years, they've been telling us this day is coming, and they've never given up, and we can't either. So thank you all for being here.
The reality is just what Marilyn said. Who we're fighting now are our neighbors, are our friends. Community forest licenses are what are raping our watersheds right now. Because we protested the government doing it, they just got a handful of your neighbors together and said, community forest license, here you go. Then they said, we'll do it better. It's not better. There's nothing better about it. I've been saying for over 20 years now, no logging in domestic use watersheds. And until we all stand on that, all make that the base demand of every single one of us in our watersheds, and say no logging in domestic use watersheds, period, the government is not going to listen. We have to, like Pierre said, become united. That should be one thing. We shouldn't say, well, your watershed, not mine. It's okay in that watershed, but not mine. It's not okay in anyone's watershed, and that should be a base demand. Yes. There is a petition here for conservancy. The reality is the government has already shot down, when we applied for Perry's Ridge to put it in park status, they already shot that down. But guess what? They're allowing logging, they're going into parks now. What protection is that? At least a conservancy, there's no logging and no mining. So, you know, don't just say it's okay a little bit, it's okay this, it's not okay. No logging in domestic use watersheds, and all watersheds should be placed in conservancy. That's what I've stood on all this time. We get up, we say it every time, we say it over and over. Ask Louise how many times she said it. Pierre said it over and over. Marilyn said it over and over. It's time to get our shit together, hey? And get united on those fronts and make a bottom line and stand on it. Guess what? I've been arrested for this water. I've been arrested for these trees. A lot of us have we not gone to jail for
I
these
did,
very
yeah,
things?
oh yeah, it was good fun, Perry's Ridge, 97.
So,
And then they tried to kill me in Argenta when I blockaded by myself. They literally, the police.
You're saying it's getting to a critical point. Ask those who died at Johnson's Landing when it got critical. It's been critical. Time to wake up and realize that landslide's at our tail.
The British didn't leave India until the people got on the ground. They will not stop doing it until the people do something. The people lead, the politicians will follow. We have no MLA here. We've never had an MLA that cared about our water. I don't care if it was liberal, soak red, blah, blah, blah. We've got an MP right now smiling all the time. The NDP, they're always smiling. I would be too if I was a school teacher, getting the pension from being a school teacher, but they don't do nothing about mountain caribou. There's a fiduciary responsibility of the government to protect mountain caribou. There's fiduciary responsibility to protect this, but they won't do shit. They won't do shit. I don't need that. They won't do shit. Until we, the people, lead, the politicians will follow. Our MLA is weak and rich.
Yes, Tom. Good man. Right on.
Notice how they will never be able to log Vancouver's watershed.
No, exactly. I've said it 10 times.
That's
right.
What's the difference?
Well, because we got no people here.
Will Coop was the difference. He was with BC Tap Waters. It took organizations down there to get them out of those 3 watersheds. And Will Coop with BC Tap Waters, what he did was he went to the hospital after a huge rain. And how many people had gastrointestinal problems that they linked back to the logged off areas within those watersheds. And so it was a lot of work. Those watersheds didn't get protected because somebody didn't do what you folks are doing here. So it's important to recognize Will and his works. Just to
please post videos of yourself saying why you care. I think that's really powerful when you speak from the heart and say which watershed you live in, why you want it protected, and then support other people who are doing that as well. So if somebody posts that, share it, like it, comment on it. That magnifies its effect. So as a new politician, we've had at least 4 of our councillors here today. We gain power from you. The more noise you make, the more posts that you can share and the more comments you can get, that actually gives us authority in council, in parliament, in the legislature. So keep that up and do more of it directly to Michelle, to Wayne.
I agree.
Write them letters, like actual handwritten letters that will have the biggest impact. If not that, then send emails, post on social media and tag them. They respond so much more than you might realize from that kind of engagement. And the final thing I want to say is we are going to experience here in Nelson some direct impact in the next 6 months on the drive from Cottonwood all the way to the Nordic Ski Club at Apex. All of that is threatened, and it's going to come quicker than you might realize, and we need to do something about it. So share with your friends, go to Cottonwood, make a video there. One of the things we've been hearing is because of the logging that's been happening, and there has not been that much of an outcry, we're hearing the refrain that I guess people don't care. Like, oh, I haven't heard very much about it. When that logging went in, it was so dramatic and people didn't say very much. Well, you need to be heard. We're only 50 of us here, but we can be a lot more than that by using our voice and encouraging our friends to post and to come out to these events. So please do that. They're under threat. We have an opportunity to do something now. And in some cases, these watersheds, like Jessica has said, we're not going to have that opportunity in 6 months. They're slated to be cut, and cut, especially in the private lands. We're talking about post to post. It's not managed or selective cutting. It's stripped, clean, with not necessarily, in many cases, without the requirement to replant or to clean up the slash that's been left behind. This is what we're going to face right here. So let's get out there and do something.
We're going to stop it.
All right.
With a watershed needs to absolutely wrap. It's in BC Environment, it's Murray, you may get Murray, he has to respond within 2 days. Everything that you put on the wrap, including they walked across and went through the fish creek, redfish, and those fish can't get up the creek. That's what you wrap out.
Yeah.
They went up to Layard. That Layard creek slid in 2011. No one did anything. Those are fish. You are not allowed, as I understood under BC law coming through the Shuswap, you're never allowed to walk into a creek that has fish. That's an ecological fine right there. And I'm trying to figure out how the Kootenays got away with this, because there's so many creeks. Right now, the fish cannot get up. Inappropriate behavior. So you call RAP. They have to go down there and investigate that creek immediately. And why was it not repaired? And who said you were allowed to go through it? And then we're going to find out. We're going to walk back and we're going to go, wow, interesting how forestry allowed permits into areas with fish-bearing creeks? I would suggest that we take a look at who's running our country right now. Who's running forest? That's inappropriate behavior. I'm a forest technician. I'm a silviculturist. This is not allowed. I built roads where we had to stand this high in the creek to build the actual bridge to cross over. Since when do you just go over whenever you want? They did the very same thing out here in Belfort again. They brought the machines out, they just knocked it right into the creek, and now one of the guys' box was full of mud. You know what? Those guys are drinking muddy water for the last since 2011. No one's doing it. They made a mistake, however, that they did not enforce the time limit that they had in order to do this. And so now they're saying, well, you know what? The time limit is the problem. Well, at the end of the day, that water just got all muddied up after that 3-day rain again. That's a cause to call us a RAP again. They have to stop logging in all watersheds. It's inappropriate behavior. They should be ecological land reserves, community watersheds, community forests, the way it was meant to be in BC. BC's water should be feeding all of Canada. We should be bottling water for Canadians so we don't drink chlorinated water. Chlorinated water is inappropriate for the body. It causes magnesium deficiency. At the end of the day, your plasma alone is 90% water. I want you to tell me what synthetic can exchange for water. There is not one on this planet. Wrap everybody out. Wrap every watershed. We ask every watershed in British Columbia to join with us as a team of one. Bring all your individual pieces and individual concerns, but we all go in as one. Because as one, we will take them.
So the Grand Forks watershed, it's the Kettle River Watershed Authority.
Right.
And so in order, if I want the people who run our watershed authority to join with what you're doing, who do I tell them to contact?
You can contact me, Margaret Ann Simon. You can contact waterislife333@gmail.com, and we'll respond to you and we will add you with all your petitions. Hopefully you've got petitions. And we will literally storm the fax machines of every government official necessary in order to create the legislation, reopen the plans that we had in the 80s that really stated that all ecological reserves are over top of every watershed. That's the only way to protect them. The gentleman was correct. The only way to protect them is to create all of them as an ecological land reserve. Every single one. I sent a map to the Premier. And I'm hoping that he will respond to that map, because that map is now the Grey Horse. If you take a look at the Grey Horse, it's the Selkirk Range. It runs all the way to Rebel Bush. If you look at the lakes alone, there are 2 major lakes all the way running beside that. Dare you pollute those lakes and all the people that live in it? We are the top of the water. We are the shed. If you ruin the shed, everybody below us will have poisoned water. Is that something that the people of Canada want? I ask you that. But the email you want is waterislife@333@gmail.com.
waterislife333@gmail.com.
Or Kootenay Water is Life. Either way, you will find us and we will join together. Because we cannot separate. That's what they've had you do. Oh, well, this is our town. Oh, that's our town. No, actually, this is British Columbia. This is my province. This is my country. You have to look at a larger, broader view. Not this small, little, tiny view. Because that will not do the job.
Right.
As you can see, 20 years hasn't done the job. 30 years hasn't done the job.
Yeah, and that's why we flooded in Grand Forks.
That's right, because nobody is doing the job. If we would have been with you, we would have went, no, we can't log in that. Oh, hell no. It's been brought to our attention. Especially mine. I don't allow this kind of inappropriate behavior. We're Canadians, for God's sake. Protect the water. That's one major resource that we have that no one else really has.
Yeah.
Why aren't we selling that resource to the Yanks? Not sending 60% of our full-on raw logs to the Yanks. For what? We don't get anything in return. Why aren't you putting our carpenters to work? My good God, in hemp? Why aren't we turning the soils over? We don't need to log trees. We have plenty of hemp. We're building cars out of hemp. We're making roadways out of hemp. My God, we have the prairies. We could be Hemp Canada.